Welcome back. I'm here today with Natasha Nazerali. She is a practitioner and educator who guides individuals to awaken their true power through spiritual and biological connections. Inspired by her holistic upbringing and the teachings of Dr. Hammer's five biological laws, Natasha is dedicated to helping others achieve total sovereignty and freedom over their mind, body, and spirit. Through her work in family systems and biological relating, Natasha has realized the beauty and the harmonization of our unique ancestral lineage. As a spiritual seeker and a student of life, Natasha emphasizes the role of consciousness through her trainings at the College of Psychic Studies in the UK and her incorporation of ancient practices. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you so much for having me, Meredith.
Yeah, it's so great to connect and just to hear a little bit more of all this work you've been doing. So, I connected with you through Freya. Freya has a podcast called German New Medicine Stories. And I found her podcast. I was just in a prayer about some of my own health challenges. And it was like that week, I think I listened to a podcast with Melissa Sell. And then I just went into the podcast app and searched more. What is this German new medicine? Found Freya's podcast, was listening to all of those and came across you and the work you do, especially around female just biology and connection with our cycles, our menstrual cycles, being a woman, how we feel about our femininity, which really connected with me. So I also got to do a session with you at one point, which was super helpful. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's interesting hearing how everybody comes across this work because, I have grown up in this paradigm with my mother. I don't want to age her, but I think she's learned it almost 20 years ago. And it wasn't really very well known then. It was very kind of underground. There wasn't, Instagram, social media, these things were not as popular then as they are now. So there were only a limited number of practitioners and educators around the world that were sharing this work. And then there was amazing resources and books and everything that Hammer had written himself to get this information and this biological wisdom out there. But today, it's so incredible to see how many people all over the world are coming across this knowledge, are adopting this knowledge, studying this knowledge, or just using their own platform to speak on it.
Yeah. So let's dive in. What is German New Medicine? It's possible that people listening to this, this is the first time they're hearing about it. So could you kind of break down what it is? How did it come to be? And then we can get kind of into like conflict activity and the healing phase and all of
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So, German New Medicine, it's interesting just with the name in itself because it has really nothing to do with Germany. It's not new and it's not medicine. But the original name in German was Germanische Heilkunde, which just means Germanic healing knowledge. And this is really the understanding of our biology. So it's not a modality, as many people like to think. It's not a cure, and it's not a method of therapy. It's actually a biological codification and a biological framework. So this knowledge was discovered by a man named Dr. Hammer, who discovered this framework in the 80s. And he was working in oncology. He had a big reputation for himself as an innovator. He invented something called the Hammer scalpel that's even used by surgeons all around the world today. And he went through a very unfortunate tragedy. Unfortunately, his son died. He was murdered in a big case. And after losing his son and going through that huge trauma, he developed testicular cancer. And at the time, he had this sort of hypothesis that clearly this cannot be a coincidence that I go through this major traumatic event with the death of my son, and shortly after I develop cancer. But what he didn't know how to do was how to go about proving the correlation between the psyche and our body. So, this is where he really embarked on the journey to make it his mission to develop, you know, evidence of this connection that we have. And we automatically, as conscious people, I'm sure anyone who's listening to your podcast, we think this, right? Like, clearly psychosomatics or psychology, there has to be some sort of relationship. And so Hammer thought the same thing. And what he started with is just asking his patients, and he went symptom by symptom. So he started with just his testicular cancer and asked all of his patients, have you recently gone through a loss? You know, he had gone through the death of his son, and he asked all of his clients, what did you recently experience? And he found that 100% of the time, they too had just gone through a very similar conflict theme of loss. And then the next step that he thought was, okay, if I'm seeing a symptom, so I'm seeing a change and adaptation at the organ level, and then I'm speaking to these patients and I'm also seeing that they've gone through something immense at the psychological level. Could this be appearing in the brain? And that was his next sort of hypothesis. And so from there, he would do CT scans on all of these patients. And what he found is in 100% of the cases of testicular cancer, at the brain level in the CT scan, at the relay that controlled the testicles in the brain, he saw this really interesting sort of target ring formation. So, what he actually discovered there is okay, I can see at the brain level that something is going on in the body. And then he went through symptom by symptom like this. So then he went through all women with ductal breast cancer and he did their brain scans and he found the same ring formation in the relay that controlled the milk ducts. And then he went to the pancreas. So he went through organ by organ by organ. And that's how he created this codification. And that's also why those who might have looked into this work will notice that we have an actual scientific chart. And it's just like a scientific chart of elements, but it's for the body. So it'll show that, oh, the skin is controlled by the cerebral cortex and corresponds to this brain area. And he just was a man on a mission. And he accumulated all the data and all the evidence he could with all the brain scans he could possibly have access to. And he did present his work at the academic level. So it was verified also externally. And that's kind of how we got here today.
Wow. And I remember hearing, so when we have a symptom, there's some kind of biological reason for that. So, like testicular cancer was proliferation of the cells, maybe to have another child. Can you share more
Yeah.
about that?
So, this codification is based on 5 fundamental laws that Dr. Hammer called the 5 biological laws of nature. Okay. So, the first biological law is very simple. It's just like Meredith explained. I have a conflict shock, and therefore I have a symptom. Yeah. So, the first law is really just telling me that every single symptom in the body is because of a conflicting experience that we went through. And a conflict shock is any sudden, dramatic, acute, unexpected event. So, for Dr. Hammer, it was the sudden, shocking death of his son. For somebody else, it could be, oh, I just found out today I lost my job. And it can even be as minute as, oh my gosh, I slammed on the brakes and almost hit the car in front of me. So anything that catches us off guard creates an impact at the psyche and the brain and the organ level. So all things are happening simultaneously. That's the first law. And it's really the one that we kind of know in the holistic community that the body keeps the score and nothing is random. And clearly, my body is reflecting and showing something to me that's in a mirror of what it is I'm experiencing. Now, the second law goes off of our nervous system. So we have a daytime and a nighttime circadian rhythm, as you know. During the day, we're in our sympathetic nervous system. And in the evening, when we restore and rest and regenerate, we enter our parasympathetic nervous system. So, what we discovered is that symptoms in the body work in accordance with those two phases as well, right? We know this when we have a conflict, oh, something that catches us off guard, we go into that fight or flight mode, right? That primal survival mode. Our hands get cold, our heart is racing, our breath has changed, and we enter this sympathetic nervous system. So he found that the symptoms in our body are going the same way. We have a conflict shock and we're up all night. We're thinking about the problem. We're ruminating. Our thoughts are spiraling. And then we resolve the conflict. Maybe we get a call that, oh, we got a new job, or maybe that person caught us off in traffic, but we slammed on the brakes just in time and whew, crisis averted, right? So we enter then into the healing phase where everything restores, repairs, and regenerates. That's our second biological law. So when you know that, some symptoms, they arise when we're active in the conflict, and some symptoms arise when we heal the conflict, right? That's why, we go to work Monday to Friday and we don't really get sick. And then we go home on the weekends and all of a sudden we have the fever or a cold or a flu. That's also, why our cold and flu season is always happening at Christmas time, when school is off, when we're back, when we're home with our families. And how many triggering events do you think we have with like Thanksgiving and all these things? So of course, our body is going to follow that natural rhythm of nature, daytime, nighttime. And then we have the third law, which is just about our ontogenetic system. That tells me all the different organs, they actually correspond to different tissue layers. And we develop these tissue layers already in utero, in our embryology. So it's kind of a little bit more nitty gritty academic, but what it essentially tells me is okay, this organ corresponds to this tissue layer with that brain area, and it's going to adapt in accordance to those two phases. So it's a little bit more tricky, but kind of when you get the hang of this framework, it starts to make sense. And that fourth law that we have is the law of microbes. So it's just the law that tells us that fungi, microbes, bacteria, and even these so-called protein nucleic acid compounds, there are helpers. They're there for a job. They have a function. So anytime I'm going through a symptom, anytime I'm feeling sick or I'm feeling unwell, those are like my little firefighters that are coming to assist us. And that's kind of opposite to how sometimes we look at it in the holistic or the allopathic world, because we could say, oh, we want to get rid of bacteria or we don't want exposure to those microbes. When we look at nature, we look at everything as having a purpose and a function. And so we look at all of our terrain and our biology the same way in this lens. And that leads us to the fifth law, which is just the quintessence, that not only is everything in my body happening because of an experience that I went through, but actually the symptom is solving my problem. So if I just look at what Meredith pointed out with Dr. Hammer's adaptation of testicular cancer, if I lose my son and I have this shocking, horrific death of my offspring, how would testicular cancer solve my problem? Well, cells in the testicles would proliferate, testosterone would rise, and I would be biologically motivated to procreate. Again, this is the same thing that happens, by the way, in the female ovaries. It's also a loss conflict. And then the female will also experience cellular proliferation in the ovaries. She'll be higher in estrogen so that she can better attract a mate and solve the problem, right? So you have to look at this codification as very primal, very biological. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes because we're in such an unbiological world. We forget that we are instinctually these very primal beings.
And I think most of us, when we have difficult symptoms, we're feeling like my body is going against me. Why is my body doing this? But this like reframes all of that of your body is absolutely trying to help you and doing everything it can and going into overdrive.
Absolutely. And I would say, even in our more conscious, holistic communities, I think that's where we still go astray. Because, yes, we're bringing in the psyche and psychology, and science is now admitting that, yes, there is a correlation between, trauma or our psychic sort of awareness, perception, and symptoms in the body, but then we still demonize it, right? Then we still get a symptom and we still think something is going wrong, something must be bad, or maybe it's now my diet, or maybe it's the toxins. But what this is really showing you is a very liberated gnosis understanding of the truth of my own divine nature, because it's showing me that no, my body is just adapting. My body is creating the best biological response for me to help me overcome what it is that I'm going through.
Mhm. So let's break it down a little bit. Like conflict shock happens. I also remember hearing that emotional isolation is usually connected with that. Anything else you want to add about the conflict shock?
Yes. So the moment of the conflict shock, I am going into that first phase of sympathicatonia. So my whole biochemistry is shifting. I'm going into my primal survival mode. Yeah. And it's balanced. So the longer I am in that conflict activity, the longer the healing phase is going to be, right? And this follows the law of the universe, of nature. For every action is an equal opposite reaction. So our biology is going the same way. When I enter in that state, I'm shifting at the biological level, and I'm having cold hands, my heart is racing, my breath is changing, I'm ruminating, I'm not sleeping, I'm up all night. So I'm having this shift. And at that moment of that conflict shock, when my psyche, brain, and organs work in synchronicity, a program is created. So at that instinctual moment, my body is going, what can we do to solve Meredith's problems? What adaptation is going to best suit her? And that adaptation is going to be based upon my perception. This is why our sort of conscious state is really important when we know this work. So, for example, if you and I are sitting in a restaurant together, yeah, and all of a sudden we have a conflict shock of a fire starting in the restaurant, Meredith and I would both perceive that conflict differently, right? I could go into a scare fright conflict or a death fright, and I might start an adaptation that comes in at my lungs. Or, Meredith could, I don't know, she could perceive that as a territorial anger of like, oh my gosh, this could be in my territory. I'm having this anger over this fire that's starting, and she might have something in the small curvature. So it's really dependent on the way in which I perceived that conflict, right? And that's why that emotional isolation is also so difficult, because now we're in the conflict. I've built this whole perception narrative around what this story means for me. And now I feel incredibly isolated. So that's that first phase. And then I go into resolution. So maybe we put the fire out, yeah. And then we go home, and all of a sudden I get sick. So maybe I have bronchitis and I have a really bad cough because I had a scare fright. And maybe, Meredith has this indigestible morsel territorial anger and her stomach is hurting and she's vomiting and she's purging. Yeah. And she's going into that restore and repair and regeneration. And ideally, we come out of that, we let our bodies do our thing, and we go back into harmony, and our organ is even better than before. But what happens with chronic conditions is the same conflict keeps coming up over and over and over again in our life. And so we get re-triggered and re-triggered and re-triggered, and the program runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. And now we have what allopathy calls a very chronic condition, right?
Yeah. So we have to get really into the psyche and how are we getting re-triggered and what's happening with our thoughts and all of those pieces.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I understand that most of the time the symptoms come up in the healing phase, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the conflict happens, and then at some point, something happens that allows the body to relax. There's some kind of resolution. I thought we could give a few examples here. Like,
Yeah. Well, since,
yeah,
I work with women, let's talk about, one of our favorite beloved organs, the breast, because that's a really good way to sort of highlight the differences of why some develop symptoms in conflict activity and some in the repair phase. So, breast cancer is such a major topic for so many women. It's kind of ingrained in us that we need a mammogram and we need to be aware and we need to do a self-examination, right? And even just as an organ at the biological level, it's such a representative of our fertility, right? We're nourishing our children, our offspring through the breast. It's quite sacred, wouldn't you say? Yes. So let's use it as an example to kind of highlight what Meredith is trying to sort of explain here. So the most common type of breast cancer is ductal breast cancer. And if we're looking at the milk ducts, that's going to be a conflict of separation. So the milk ducts are controlled by the cerebral cortex. It's ectodermal tissue. And the cerebral cortex is the area of the brain responsible for communication. So it's kind of our most advanced area of the brain, right? And that makes sense because we are communicating through the skin. It's a sensory organ, right? It's about touch, it's about who is on my skin. So in the adaptive nature, the conflict of the milk ducts is separation. It's like torn from my breast, right? It's a point also where I connect with my children. So if I feel separated from my child, I might have a program that runs there. Or if I feel separated from my partner, yeah, this is all about that point of connection. And even mastitis is this separation conflict. So it's that mother who is feeding her baby, and then maybe one day she leaves baby with her grandmother for the first time, and she's running conflict active when she leaves the baby and thinking, is that okay? Is this going okay? Yeah. And then she comes back to baby, puts baby back on the breast. Oh, thank God. And now all of a sudden, oh, clogged milk duct. Why? Because when I'm active in the separation conflict, I'm losing cells in the milk duct and my milk ducts are widening. And most women, they don't even feel this. But if you know this work, you might be really aware. And when you're conflict active, you might even feel just a slight pulling sensation on the milk duct. And now I'm reunited with baby. I put baby back on my breast, and all the cells that I lost when I was in conflict activity, they need to be replenished, right? So now I put baby back on there, and now I have a clogged milk ducts, or I have cellular growth, right? And so now if I'm really active in a separation conflict, so let's say a mother is going through a separation with a child where maybe for some reason I lost custody of my child, or my child moves away, or a loss of a child. Now I might go very conflict active. And in the repair phase, remember, the intensity of conflict activity is the intensity of my symptom. I might have so much cellular growth that now I have a diagnosis of breast cancer, right? Now I have tumor growth. But we actually look at it as something really lovely. We would say, oh, you resolved that separation conflict. Yeah. And it can also have the nuance of I want to separate, right? And many mothers experience that during breastfeeding of like, oh my God, my baby is attached to my breast and I just can't handle this. And I have so many things to do and I want to separate. So that could be the nature of the theme too. Or, you could have a breast program and the milk ducts running on your partner side because you would like to be separated from your partner. So think of this theme of separation through it's either the touch that I'm missing, right? That I'm feeling separated from, or it's the touch that I would like to separate from that is unwanted because it's that sensory organ. So, our largest organ in the body, the skin, is also that separation conflict. Okay. So, with the milk ducts, in conflict activity, I'm not having a symptom, I'm not even noticing it. But now I enter the repair phase, and now I have tissue growth in my ducts. And I go, oh my gosh, I might have breast cancer. And I go and I run to get a mammogram and a biopsy and X, Y, and Z because I have this abnormal, irregular growth. But normally, and what we've seen with many clients, if I have fully resolved the conflict and the trigger doesn't come up with for me again, the fungi, the microbes, and bacteria will eventually break down that tissue growth and the organ will return to normal. Or, right, if I don't have the fungi, microbes, and bacteria, let's say I have a long history of a medication or I've been on antibiotics, that cellular growth will just like encapsulate itself and it will stay there, but it won't cause me any harm. So that's the ducts. It's operating that way. But now, if we look at the other program, right, we have the breast glands. And this is a totally different area. This is controlled by the cerebellum. So this is operating in cellular growth during conflict activity, right? It's going, oh my gosh, there's a conflict in the nest. Yeah. And if there's a conflict in my nest, what can I do? I can help nourish my tribe. So it's like the glands in my breasts start to proliferate. And now I have glandular growth. So glandular breast cancer is growing in conflict activity. I'm worried for my tribe. Usually, with what I've seen, it's I had chaos in my family home, or I once had a client who had glandular breast cancer because her daughter was struggling with addiction. So she had this nest worry about my daughter and will she be okay? And is she going to recover? And is she going to go into rehab? Right. And that's a really tricky one because now you're having to look at somebody and say, you really need to resolve this conflict because you're going to continue this symptom until you repair it. So let's say I resolve the nest worry. Let's say I reunite with the harmony in my tribe, or my daughter comes back and she's okay and she gets recovered. Or I might even have a perceptual shift where those, that conflict just doesn't matter to me as much anymore. Now, all the cellular growth will break down during the repair phase. So they're kind of operating in those two ways. That's why when somebody comes to me and says, oh, my friend has breast cancer, what should I do? My first question is always, well, what type of breast cancer? Because we need to know. If it's ductal, I would say, congratulations. Yeah, she felt separated and she feels united again. And if it's glandular, I would say, all right, we really need to work on this conflict and resolve it for this individual.
Yeah, that's so nuanced. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I have more female biological symptoms I want to go through. And before I do that, I just want to share. I thought of a story from my own life of something really simple that people can start to look in their own life. Just when I started learning about like colds and runny noses and sneezes, like the most simple thing that all of us are familiar with and we get. I had this one experience recently where a friend took me down to this natural hot spring that was like right on the edge of the ocean. And it was like warm water and beautiful. But it was only available during like a new moon when at a certain time, it was at night and it was like a straight drop down to go to this hot spring. And so we're like going down. I'm on my hands and knees at different points, like getting down through all these rocks. And then you get to the bottom and there's the ocean, and is the waves going to be okay? And it's kind of like a cave. And so we had the hot spring experience. And then again, going back up, I'm like on a cliff. It's dark. I have a flashlight. I'm having to look for all these handholds and rocks. And I didn't think much of it when I was going through it. But when I got home, I took a bath and my nose just like runny nose. So no other symptoms. It only lasted for like an hour or two, but I just kept blowing my nose. And I was like, huh, I think I was sniffing for danger or
Yeah.
something was, yeah, I was conflict active. And it was so cool to see it so clearly like that.
Yeah.
But I notice that now all the time. If I get a dry nose, a runny nose, like what stunk or where was I sniffing for danger?
Yeah,
Right.
so Meredith is talking about the sinuses, which is our stink conflict. That's also controlled by the cerebral cortex as well, that area responsible for communication. So what's happening is when she's going down to the hot springs and thinking, oh, this stinks. I like to call it like the annoyance or the frustration, like, oh, I'm gonna have to go all the way down here. She's losing cells in her sinuses so she can better sense her environment, right? If I'm active in this conflict, I can better sense the environment around me. Yeah. And then she goes to the hot springs, everything's fine, and she comes home. And now, with the cellular ulceration that happened in the conflict activity, so because she was losing cells, now when she comes home, conflict is over, rest, repair, restore. All the cells that are lost are replenished with our little helpers and our microbes. So now what do I have is I have this really stuffy nose. And that sneeze, yeah, that's what we call the epicrisis. That's the real acute point of our healing, right? That's that real intense, juicy part of any so-called illness, when we have a fever or when we finally vomit or when we purge or when we sneeze, when it gets really, really intense. And then, we finally do, and then we feel a little bit better. So that's when we know, okay, I'm out of the woods and I'm getting back into my regular harmonious state. But yeah, when you know this work, it's like you kind of become psychic because you look at someone who just sneezed and you're like, oh, what were you so frustrated about,
Hmm. It's been so helpful and also so freeing to not always be thinking about, oh, so and so's viruses and contagion and all of that. And just like, wow, maybe my own body is going through a conflict and then finding resolution.
Yeah. And I think also what's important to note too is, some people come across German new medicine and then they think, oh, this is the cure. But it's tricky because this work is about you yourself having to be your own healer. And I find through my own journey with it, it's also about building resiliency within my own psyche. So, when I have a symptom that's chronic, like for me, I run a lot of skin programs. So that's also separation. Yeah. And I might have something, where it's like I move away from my family and I start to get, chronic little rashes. So I'm feeling separated and then I resolve it. And then I'm feeling separated and then I resolve it. That's when you get that like real psoriasis patchiness because you're going active in the conflict of feeling separated or wanting to separate. And then maybe you're reunited with your family and you resolve it. And then you get the rash, right? All the cells replenish. And now my skin gets red and it gets a flare up, but then I go conflict active again. So that's why it's almost like we get that itchy flakiness because we have this split energy of the conflict going in and out, in and out. We're being re-triggered and re-triggered and re-triggered. And so sometimes it's easy to think, oh, if I just know this, it'll go away. And yeah, it can be so. Some people I've worked with, they just become aware of it and they have this aha moment and it sort of like breaks the spell of their triggers and it goes away. But for other people, this is their sort of psychological story that keeps coming up and up again. And I think that's okay because I believe spiritually and through a conscious evolution standpoint that we're meant to work through things and build resiliency. So if I have symptoms that come up in the body, some people have indigestion issues a lot, they're like, oh, everything I can't stomach. And that track comes up for them a lot. And just because they know this work doesn't mean that the symptom goes away, but they have the awareness of it.
Thank you for all of your explanations. They're so thorough and helpful.
Yeah.
Um, I want to get into biological femininity and some of the symptoms that come along with menstrual cycles and painful menstrual cycles and short menstrual cycles and long ones and all the things that go with that. So, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, Meredith, she's getting so advanced with me. My goodness. Yeah, so let's start with sort of the alpha. So what Dr. Hammer found through all his brain scans is that in biology and in nature, we have an alpha female and an alpha male. And we know that, right? We've studied this. But it kind of means something different when we look at what is an alpha female or what is an alpha male in biology. An alpha just means first, right? It's just the original construct. So the alpha female and the alpha male, I like to use the analogy of it's like Adam and Eve. It's the original divine primal human as God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, created. Yeah. So they're living in harmony with nature and their biology is responding in accordance with that. They are the alpha. So when Homer was going about all of his accumulation of data and looking at the CT scans, right, he would see, oh, all these conflicts are registering at the brain level and they're creating all these adaptations. So the alpha female or the alpha male would have to be the one that doesn't have these conflicts, right? That are changing and adapting them. And he specifically looked at the brain area of the temporal lobe. So the temporal lobe is a brain area where when I'm getting a conflict, not only is my biology adapting at the organ level, but I'm also having a biochemical response through my hormones. Okay. So he found that the alpha female and the alpha male are the ones that don't have any conflicts in the temporal lobe. So they don't have any conflicts that are changing their biochemistry and their hormones. So they are kind of like the original one. Is that kind of making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then he found something really interesting and he examined all these alpha females and he found that they have a 28-day menstrual cycle that is pain free. All right. So 28 days makes sense because our menstrual cycle goes in accordance with what planet?
Mm-hmm. The
The
moon.
moon. And how long is the moon cycle?
About 28, 29
About
days.
28 and a half, 29 days, right? So wouldn't it make sense that the alpha female, she would have her cycle in accordance with nature? Yeah. And that's also why, by the way, when us females get together, we have this phenomenon of our cycle syncing up. Well, what's happening is we're getting together as females, we're sweating and we're secreting through our sweat glands. And then it's actually like super magical and mystical when you think about it. It's like in this invisible level of the matrix, yeah, we communicate with each other through these molecules and our cycles sync up. They will actually sync up to the most feminine one of us, which is just the female that has the most estrogen. And it has a biological purpose. Why would females sync up? Well, because it just takes one male to seed an entire race. So if you look at a wolf pack, when the alpha male leaves to go on his hunt, if he comes back and all the females in the pack, if they ovulate at the same time, we now have the best chance at producing the most offspring, right? So you have to think nature is about survival. Nature is build back better. Nature is whatever it is we need to do for the survival of the species. So that's also why we females are syncing up in this manner and why we are communicating and expressing ourselves through our hormones, estrogen and testosterone. So that alpha female, she's the most feminine one. She's very fertile. She's having a harmonious 28-day cycle. And what's interesting about her that I think is really important about our true biological feminine nature is that she also has the cervix and the clitoris and the vaginal canal all wide open. She doesn't have any sexual conflict. So it means that she can easily achieve an orgasm. Okay. And you might be thinking, why is this relevant? Okay. But think about what is the role of the female? What's the most important thing that we do in nature?
Have babies.
Yeah, we're mothers, right? That's our biological value. Like every single person on this earth plane comes from a mother, has to be born of a mother. So now, if you just look biologically at those organs, right, from the cervix to the vaginal canal and outward, even on the clitoris, if I can achieve an orgasm, what does that mean about birth?
It might be more easeful.
Yes,
Yeah.
that actually the alpha female, not only does she have a pain-free cycle because she doesn't have any conflicts, but she has an ecstatic birth. And that explains to us this phenomenon that we've been seeing and hearing about with women's birth stories, that they have this moment of ecstasy. So, what I find really interesting about studying about the alpha female is that, wow, the way in which we were actually biologically designed as women was to have ecstasy in birth. And that makes sense, right? The same way we are created is the same way we should be born. Yeah. Making kind of sense. Yeah. So this is the alpha female. So this is God's nature's natural design. But my goodness, do we live in a wild world? So most females experience a lot of conflicts. Yeah. So
Right.
generally, if I were to generalize, when we're looking at the female reproductive system and symptoms that are happening in the cycle and this and that, what do you think the conflict theme would be?
Something with sex or
Yeah,
relationships.
it's
Yeah.
about our sexuality, right? So
Mhm.
we're getting these conflicts with sexuality or procreation, right? That's all our body is designed to do. The whole menstrual cycle is serving us to motivate us to go get a baby. Yeah. And our whole biology is wired and designed around it, whether we like it or not. Women, Meredith, seem to have a really big problem with me when I tell them this. But it is the truth. They somehow don't like this because they're like, my value is not just being a mother and this and that. But
Totally.
actually, it can be really freeing because whether you've actually become a mother or not is completely irrelevant. Your body is doing that regardless. Yeah. And it's really good to understand that. So, what Hammer noticed is anytime a female is going through a sexual conflict, so that looks like I might not feel safe in my femininity, or maybe I'm in a relationship with a man, but I just can't see him as the father of my child, or maybe even as a young girl, to be fatherless, or to have a father who doesn't make you feel safe, or is aggressive, or causes chaos in the family home. These are all actually registered as sexual conflicts because I'm not safe in my femininity. And I think what's important to know as women is like, we talk about this idea of safety a lot, right?
Mm.
And we're even in these sort of psychosomatic spaces or more conscious spaces, we're taught, oh, well, we need to feel safe. But what does it actually mean as a woman to feel safe? Most
How
women
to
can't
be,
answer for me.
yeah, feel protected, to
Yeah,
feel like
sure.
we can relax.
Sure, like we can relax, but that's that's not specific enough. Like I'm feeling protected. Why does the female need to feel protected? Why would she need protection as a female?
Oh, to have a baby.
Yes, because she would have a baby, and then therefore that offspring needs to be protected. All right. So she needs that protection. So if I'm going back to what I originally said, the number one role of the biology of the female is revolving around motherhood and around offspring and procreation. That means in order for me to feel safe, I need to feel safe enough to have a
Have a baby.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to say circumstances for procreation need to be available to me. It means that I'm safe in my female body. If I get pregnant tomorrow, wonderful. Harmony, nature. Yeah.
Mm.
That's really conflicting statement for a lot of women. They're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that? Like, I don't, yeah, sure, your awareness or your psyche or your construct might have different opinions on that. But you're going through a phases of a cycle. You're ovulating, you're bleeding X, Y, and Z. And so your body is having this emotional, biological, psychological response. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to put it this way. If you're a single female out there in the world and you don't have a partner in your life, so you got to make money and take care and provide for yourself, are the circumstances for procreation available to you?
Not as easy.
Not as easy. If you are a young teenage girl and you're living in a chaotic home where your parents are yelling and fighting and screaming at each other, and your dad is not a very kind man, are the circumstances for procreation available to you?
No, not as
If I'm
comfortable.
in, yeah, if I'm in a relationship with the partner or the man in my life, but he can't get it together, and I just look at him like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I want to be with you, let alone have children with you. Are the circumstances for procreation available to me?
Yeah.
No, it's actually females living in conflict with their own biology. Yeah. And by the
Yes.
way, if I'm also going on the pill, so now if I'm taking birth control, I am preventing myself from being able to have babies. So again, circumstances for procreation are definitely not available to me. So I am in conflict as well. Yeah. And now what happens is my biology is wise, okay? This divine biological system is highly intelligent. Remember, it's always going to do what it needs to do to solve my problem. So if I'm in the middle of this conflict, yeah, this sexual conflict, which is not about sex, is actually about my sex as a female. If I am active in that conflict, my body's going to be very intelligent and say, what could we do to solve the problem? Oh, I know. Let's change her hormones. So let's lower estrogen and let's increase testosterone, because if she's not safe as a woman to procreate, she needs to go out there, protect, and provide for herself. And what hormone can best help her do that? Testosterone, because testosterone is our action oriented hormone, right? It's active. It's about accumulating resources so I can have a territory, so I can go out and provide for myself. Estrogen is our passive hormone. It's about our emotions. It's about our nest. It's more depressive. So I increase testosterone. And when I increase testosterone, remember that alpha female, she had that 28-day cycle. But now, if I'm a little higher in testosterone, it's going to elongate my cycle. So now, instead of having 28-day cycles, I have longer than 28-day cycles. And if I get so active in that conflict, what might happen? I might lose my menstrual cycle altogether, right? I might stop to menstruate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now I'm so high in testosterone, the sexual conflict is so active that my body responds and goes, not time for a baby. Right.
Yeah.
And this is where we see this whole phenomenon happening right now in, the female health world of perimenopause, right? That's quote unquote perimenopause. Because think about how many sexual conflicts the modern day woman goes through. I mean, a ton, right? And you have to think about those triggers like coins in a piggy bank, and the next coin comes in, and the next coin comes in. And the heavier the load, the more dramatic my biology is responding. So we have this real masculinization of women going on because they're loaded in their conflict. And now they need to go and protect and defend their territory themselves. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's sort of what makes the period longer. And now, what makes our cycles really short is now, if I'm in this testosterone driven biochemical viewpoint, I look at the world through that masculine brain hemisphere, which is all about my territory, right? So I want to establish my position on a hierarchy. I want to achieve value through my resources, through my reputation, through my career, right? Through my education. That's all my territory. But now what happens is, on that brain hemisphere, I have all these territorial conflicts. So now, if I lose my territory, if I go through a conflict of territorial loss, maybe that could look like I really wanted that job promotion, but I didn't get it. Or I lost this job or relationship, and now I have to move back into my parents. So now I have like an actual territorial loss. Or it could be I really, was dating this man or this woman, and I thought they were the one for me. I perceived them as my territory, and then they rejected me. So I lost that territory. Yeah. Now, this conflict is going to lower my testosterone and up my estrogen. So now I go more depressive. Now I'm more emotional. And now, with very high estrogen, my cycles get very short. So now my cycles are less than 28 days. Yeah. I should say, because this is very advanced, that is for the right-handed female. The left-handed female, she is, extra feminine. She has more estrogen. And so she is not really having territorial conflict. She's having only really, well, not only, but her conflicts are sexual of nature. So she's having that sexual female conflict, but the right-handed female, she has territorial. So it's different depending on our handedness. And I think that's why this work can feel so daunting to people to understand.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, I have to know my handedness and like how my hormones are working. But yes, and you'll get the hang of it. And if you don't know it that deeply, don't worry, because it's your biology. So it's working on you anyway. But for those listening that are curious, our handedness is actually determined at the point of cellular division in embryo. So we're always right-handed or left-handed. And if you look at a pair of identical twins, one will be right-handed and the other will be left-handed. And this is also
Oh,
designed for the survival of the species.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes so deep. I'm just thinking about that question you posed of if a woman were to get pregnant tomorrow, would everything be a-okay? And it's like for many women, maybe most women, our culture doesn't support that. It's like, yeah, women need to be in the workforce. Women need to be, providers in some way. And then just like looking at least in the US, how little resources there are for women to like have a postpartum time or childcare or X, Y, and Z. Like, yeah, I think for anyone listening, I just want to normalize that biological femininity is probably not the norm for most people. We are facing a lot of conflicts just from our culture and things that, we didn't necessarily decide. It's just how things are in this culture that we have grown to be in that's so focused on productivity.
Yeah, and it really truly takes a village, right? And even if you look at the female who's never had a desire for children, that's a conflict too. And that's the one that really women get really mad at me for saying, but if you understand biology and you understand how the hormones work, right? When you're ovulating, you're having a biological response. Yeah. And you're like, I'm ovulating. And your hormones are communicating also you can procreate and get pregnant. So, the female who does feel safe, who does feel harmonious, of course she's motivated to become a mother and she wants that and she desires that. By the way, our biology, like women can hear higher frequency than men, and that's because they need to hear the sound of a baby crying. Like we even have adaptations at the milk ducts when you're seeing a baby, that you're even responding through that. So we're having biochemical responses that are all designed around procreation, around motherhood, and to motivate us to procreate. So if the female says, like, I've never had a desire for children, I've never looked at a child and felt like, oh, baby fever, I want to hold that baby in my arms. Like, of course, we would never survive if we didn't have that motivation. If a mother didn't look at a baby and want to immediately grab that baby and put her in her arms, I mean, the species would just never go on. And the same thing is for men, too. Men have a biological motivation to procreate, too. So if a man didn't want to become a father, that would also indicate that he had some kind of conflict that he experienced. And here's where we get back to that fifth biological law of the quintessence, where it's like non-judgmentalism. There's no good, there's no bad. It just means that I went through an experience in my life, and now this is what's most safe for me to survive. So I don't think that just because you're not motivated to become a mother that you should be one, or that means that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you at all. It just means that you went through experiences in your life that shaped the course of who you are. And not only did it shape the course of who you are in your personality or your values, but it actually did change your biology. And I think that's maybe a better, easier way to like wrap your head around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not that we did anything wrong. It's just how we've experienced and navigated this world. And
Yeah. And
like you
it
said,
doesn't
it's survival.
totally.
Like
It
for
doesn't mean
someone
that
to,
the woman who doesn't have a baby or anything like that, that there's something wrong with her. I mean, I'm speaking as an educator, and I'm not married and I don't have children yet, I should say. So yes, am I living kind of anti-biologically? Yeah, sure. I am. I'm a woman in the modern day world. So, I'm speaking from the choir here.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so German New Medicine is this way that we can just start to look at like a framework, a system, how our biology is. And then when it comes down to the actual finding of the conflicts, then we really have to ask those harder questions of like, what needs to change in my life or what needs to change in my perception to create some healing from this. Anything you want to share on that
Yeah.
level?
So what Hammer was very sort of purist on is always try and find a biological solution. So, for example, for that female, what would be her biological solution?
Um, well, a woman that wanted to have a baby or set up
A
circumstances
baby.
where,
A baby, yeah.
yeah.
So, and this is why, I mean, you're a mother, so you might have experienced this yourself. This is why a lot of women say, like, oh, I was always kind of like dating and like really into these things, and then I had a baby, and then go, well, those things just don't interest me anymore. A lot of it is
Totally.
because that sexual conflict is resolved.
Mm.
Um, it can also go the other way, of course. Like you could have a baby and that could cause a whole slew of conflict. So I'm not at all saying that a baby is going to solve the problem. But Hammer would look for these biological solutions, or he would say, oh, this is a single female and she's having a lot of period pain and she can't find a man. And that's her biggest conflict. Then he would say, well, what would really resolve her problem is, finding a partner that she was stable with, that she felt good with, that she could have a good relationship with. That might solve her problem. Or, like, for example, if you're having a lot of territorial conflicts, Dr. Hammer might tell you, move, then, leave the place that you're living, leave that job, quit that job. And you have to think like a chronic condition that's been going on through your life that's major is going to require major changes, right? Because your whole life is revolving around this slew of themes and triggers. And so he always started there of like, okay, what can I already do at the biological level to solve this problem? But then you have something, for example, you know, like a loss conflict, like the loss of a loved one. And that's really hard to get over. Yes, Hammer could say, yeah, procreation, giving life again might help for that too. But there are certain things that happen to us that are just so immense that I believe they require a more transcendent point of view. So they require a growth in our conscious evolution. And I think a great way to look at that is if you look at a child, for example, oftentimes children have all these childhood symptoms. Like I used to have a lot of eye issues, visual separation from my mother. And that used to be my big trigger as a child of like, oh, when she would leave and I would feel visually separated from her, like I couldn't see her, I would run all these eye programs in my left eye because that would be my mother child side. But of course, as I grew up with emotional maturity and I realized I can call my mom, I can be with her. Now maybe I'm like, okay, yeah, let me get rid of her. That's not so much of a conflict for me because through my emotional maturity, that just doesn't matter, right? And so maybe take that example and try to use that in your own life. And Hammer would always say, the conflict is over when you can really laugh at it. When you're like, oh my gosh, that thing that worried me, that felt so stressful before, I can just relax and have a good laugh about it now.
So helpful.
Mhm.
Well, I could probably talk to you all day, but I think we are going to start to wrap. And I tell us, like, if people are just wanting to dive in, learn more, what work are you doing in the world right now? How can people find you? All of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Melissa Sell and I, who is an amazing GNM educator and practitioner, we have an 11-week course program called The Biological Woman. And that's really for all levels because it's a deep dive into the entire anatomy of the feminine. We go through the whole body from this lens, from head to toe. And it's really also a great community of women because we take around 30 or so women at a time. Like we try to be very mindful on not over expanding the cohort so that you have real time to share about how this work is integrating into your life. And it's just been such an amazing course to host and to run. So I love doing that. We'll have that up again this October 2025, and then we'll probably do another round in the new year. And then what I also have is I've been really diving deep into homeopathy and how we can use other modalities to help support us on the healing journey. So I also have a GNM and homeopathy course that I'm teaching with a homeopathic practitioner, and that's available in October online as well. And then because I'm so passionate about this community, I make sure to do one in-person event every season. So at the end of September 2025 in Ohio, we have what's called the GNM Weekend. And that's a conference where we bring educators from all over the world to come in, and people can buy tickets and they come and they nerd out with us and they meet other like-minded community members. And that's always just so lovely. We do that once a year, but I always make it a point to have some kind of in-person workshop, something going on every season. So if you follow me, you'll be able to stay in the loop on those items. And that's what I have personally coming up. And then I always work with clients one-on-one. But wherever you're at on your learning journey, I just encourage you to start to learn the basics. And there's so many free resources out there. There's learninggnm.com. Dr. Melissa Sell has awesome YouTube videos, and you have the scientific chart and the works actually written by Hammer. Those are available as well. And those are great places for you to just be able to start learning this information all on your own.
Awesome. And I'm happy to include those links so people can access them easily.
Yeah.
Um, so we shared a lot of information today. If we were to just synthesize and offer some closing words, anything you would say to people listening?
Well, lately I gotta say, Meredith, something that I've been like diving deeper onto my spiritual and conscious journey is that I truly have become aware that the real fabric of our biology is all rooted in love. And that what makes truth so great, and like truth, just as GNM is to me, when I found this and I studied this, it just felt so, oh, this is the truth. This is nature. This is how biology works. To me, truth is what is boundless. So, learning this work, integrating this work, understanding my body through this work was liberation for me, because there's so much out there. There's information overload on health and X, Y, and Z. But I find so much of it just doesn't resonate because it's terms and conditions, and it doesn't have that boundless liberation like the understanding of this framework does. And within that, I think what the ultimate boundlessness is love, right? I think like the most boundless thing we can imagine is the love that a mother has for a child. There are no boundaries that exist within that. And so for me, the true integration of this work, the true embodiment of this work has been just leading a very heart centered, loving life, and also approaching this work and approaching my relationship with my body through the truth of love.
It's beautiful. I'd love to just close with a prayer. If we want to just close our eyes again and just bring that into our hearts, that essence of love and self-compassion, and wherever you're at on your journey, any trials you faced, any health challenges, any difficulties in your relationship to your femininity, just remembering that you're not alone, that there is so much available, and that when we really attune with our bodies and our intuition, that we are led to new possibilities, new answers. May we just continue to walk with trust, trust in the mystery, trust in what we don't know, just letting go, surrendering, and also opening to just new possibilities of coming into that empowerment and understanding our bodies and how they work and what they were really designed to do. So, with so much gratitude for you, Natasha, for sharing your wisdom today, just a little bow. Thank you. Blessed be. Namaste. Thank you for this time.